Hi everybody, and welcome to another edition of the 7 Investing Podcast. I'm Luke Hallard, and I'm joined once again by my good friend and fellow investor, Krzysztof.
Hey, good morning, Luke, or good evening.
Good afternoon. We're much more time zone close today. I'm back in London.
How's your time in Thailand?
It was fantastic. Really, really good fun. I think having my wife, Katrina, come out and join me for the last 2 weeks of the vacation introduced a nice bit of balance after the first 2 weeks of hardcore poker playing in Phnom Penh. I think that wore me down pretty badly.
Oh, you poor thing. No, it's brutal out there, man.
The game was pretty brutal. Actually, I was reflecting on my terrible results on the Phnom Penh poker game, and I've decided to go back to the books. So I've just ordered myself a copy of Modern Poker Theory because I thought I need to brush up my game.
I have that in my Amazon cart.
Very good. Well, I think one of my neighbours might be brushing up on Modern Poker Theory too, because Amazon delivered my copy on Saturday, and apparently it was handed to resident, but then no one in my house picked it up. So God knows where it's gone. So I've ordered a second one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And speaking of the Thailand beaches, I was squeezing your shoes a little bit because for our 7 Investing video you recorded with the Thailand beaches in the backdrop, palm trees and the white sands, and I thought to myself, man, that's a hard life. That's a hard life, being stuck on a beach in Thailand, working hard. But you seem to have had a unique view into that. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I guess before I joined 7 Investing, my plan was to realign my life so that I could be much more flexible, do the stuff I wanted to do and travel. So fortunately, the role with 7 Investing has not got in the way of that in any way. I feel I can do both things. And I'm connected to this fantastic global community of very smart investors and members, but I can still travel the world and drink cocktails on beaches as I please.
So you're basically smarter than the rest of us. Right?
I'm older, a little further along the journey. Let's put it that way.
Right on. Yeah, well, I mean that's kind of the dream in the real way, right? Like to be where you want to be, do what you want to do, and still contribute something of value to others.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's true. I think I definitely reflected on that when I thought I was retiring. It turned out I didn't really retire, but I definitely felt I needed not just the means to support myself, but I needed a purpose. So my prior podcast was the purpose, and then that got kind of purpose squared when I joined 7 Investing. So it's nice having those two things. I've definitely got some friends who've retired, and maybe they're still trying to find their purpose. And then, that could lead to maybe I would say being a bit lost, but at the worst outcome, spending like a life on the sofa watching Stargate.
Yeah. Yeah. Retirement doesn't make sense, right? I mean, in the sense of not having anything to do of value that you care about. That's a black hole. Yeah.
You're introducing some new structure to your life then, my friend, in the next, 5 or 6 days?
Yeah, this is Holy Matrimony Week. And I sleep like a baby, Luke, but last night, things were percolating from under the surface. So I was tossing and turning, and I think it's all coming to full consciousness that the end of my bachelor days are upon me.
I'm sure you've done enough living for 10 bachelors, and this is appropriate timing.
Yeah, I guess, I am one of the last holdouts. Maybe that's rather unusual. I'm 43, so it's my first go around.
Maybe let's sort of use the first bit of investing kind of twist to our conversation. So, as someone who's really got a grip of their finances and understands that kind of world well, how are you thinking about life differently, perhaps, now that there's a partner on the scene?
I was wondering to what extent I'll change, because 43 years of not having that consideration, or whatever, adult life years. I wonder how easily it will be for me to adjust my framework, even if I wanted to, this late in the investing game. But on the other hand, what you're asking about is a genuine difficulty all of a sudden things are going to be different. I imagine the stock answer would be somehow my risk tolerance will change, right? Isn't that kind of the expected answer?
Yeah, perhaps. Suddenly you're responsible for a second person, maybe, where you could watch your portfolio go up in flames and you're the only one who's going to suffer. But now maybe there's a second person involved too.
Yeah, and so if that's the case, are the kinds of companies I invest in going to change? And I have a hard time predicting, but I doubt it. And maybe that's because the companies I invest in now, I do the work up front, so I'm not shooting from the hip. I mean, I really try to stay away from most speculative things. So maybe that gets totally cut out. And then the guilt when things is this what happens? The guilt when things go poorly, is that what gets worse?
So is your other half got insight into your portfolio and kind of how you manage your money, or are you going to kind of keep things relatively separate, do you think?
Well, I keep my portfolio running sort of, day to day. She doesn't really know, and yet she reads the stuff that I write. And I recommend, up to this point, I recommended stocks for her. So I think she knows there's a clear overlap between what she has now based on my recommendations and what I have.
Cool. Yeah.
But I'm also pretty sure that we're going to retain some sort of financial, not independence and and we're not going to be separate, but for us, I think it's important not to blend into each other, that we lose our own identities. And I imagine money is one way of keeping the difference between church and state. Obviously, there are limits to that. In some sense, it's all one. But in another sense, I think a lot of the tensions and pressures and the negative stuff that comes with money management, when separate, it's healthier. I don't know. What's your experience? What's your strategy been?
I think different things work for different couples. We have like a bunch of common assets, like the house, the Tesla, stuff like that. She's got her own investments. I've got my investments. But we recently redid our wills. So, thinking about kind of what happens next. We don't have kids, got no plans to have kids. So we're hoping to make our friends' kids relatively wealthy at some point.
Yeah. How long have you been married?
So I have a 13-year anniversary in Thailand.
13. Oh, so that's what. Okay.
Yeah. Katrina calls my friend Tom the second wife. So I kind of had, almost like 2 anniversaries, one with Tom and then the actual one with Katrina.
All right. Maybe one last bit about marriage. This is such a loaded question, perhaps, but what wisdom do you have for me on marriage day itself?
Wow. Man, I'm not the guy to dispense this kind of wisdom. I'm kind of rubbish. I'm a bit of a rubbish, unemotional husband. Maybe the things I wish I was better at would be things like telling my wife I love her more often. I'm kind of terrible at that. I find it easy to say I love you to my buddy Albert, but I find it hard with everybody else.
Wow, Albert must have something really special going for him.
We're all hoping he's going to be married himself at some point soon. Yeah. So hopefully he doesn't have the same challenge. Yeah. He's definitely more in touch with his emotions than I am. So that was a bit of sort of negative advice, perhaps. Like, don't do what I did. Try and be, I know you are, try and be, a fully engaged person. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's really exciting. I've never had, a big party where I'll be the center of attention like that. So So hopefully I'm not in Vegas on the morning of.
Okay, there's a bit of practical advice. Like I had the bachelor party myself, which was in Ibiza with a bunch of friends, like a clear month before to give, any emergency hair growth a chance to come back if something stupid happened. But I made the error was, because I was away in Italy with about 60 friends for the wedding, and the error was doing like a mini bachelor and kind of hen party the night before where we went off to various local bars. So that was probably a tactical error, being mildly hungover on my wedding day. I do regret that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so spinach and veggies all week for me. Got it. Okay.
Stay away from the fine bourbon. Yeah.
Yeah. So Luke, it's we're changing our name, right?
We are. What do we call ourselves for the first episode?
I think we were affectionately known as two honest poker players.
Yeah. Did we get flack for that? Oh, people telling us we're not honest? I'm not sure. But that name hasn't stuck.
Right. I think I took a lie detector test and it didn't. You're lying about being honest. So the polygraph just went crazy. Yeah.
I can clearly not choose the drink in front of me. Exactly.
So what are we going with now?
Well, it was a crowdsourced suggestion from the team, but JT Street in our marketing team suggested the 7 Investing podcast presents No Limit with Krzystztof and Luke.
Sounds good, right?
I like it. It's got a twang to it. I do like the no limit. That's cool.
Right. Which means what? That we get to talk about whatever the hell we want?
You got it. And Simon can't complain. It was in the brand. There's no limit, Simon. You talk about everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we've had some fan mail, I think, though, even just after episode 1. That was pretty pleasing. I got a couple of emails. But you got a pretty special message from an early fan of the show and someone I absolutely respect.
Investing Bear, whom I affectionately call Bear in the Motley Fool boards. He would call me Monkey, and there's the whole menagerie. So anytime I think there's someone that you respect and you know has really strong investing chops, and they listen to this free form kind of thing, and they say, no, that was really great. Yeah, makes us want to go.
I got a bit of an embarrassed flush when you shared that message with me. I've been reading Bear's stuff on Saul's board for quite some time. He's certainly a smart guy.
Very much so. Yeah. So let's see if we could keep it going, Luke.
I hope so. Well, I also got a commendation from my mum. Apparently she listened to episode 1 twice. She enjoyed it so much. So
I really hope we didn't peak with episode 1. That would be unfortunate.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've got some structure now. We've got like a bunch of things we're probably going to talk about. So I think there's definitely some interesting topics in the hopper for today and for future weeks. So definitely I'm hoping the peak is several years from now.
Me too. Yeah, since we talked a little bit about No Limit and, the allusion to Hold'em still stands. Do you want to talk about what the main poker event that happened in the past week? Are you aware of that? Yeah. What's known as the poker hand?
I'm very aware. I've been keeping track. There's a guy called Doug Polk who's doing some investigative journalism on it right now. Okay. So I'm glued to his channel. Yeah, it's super interesting. Well, tell our listeners though what happened.
The gist is that at a high stakes poker game, a female player stayed in with a Jack 4, which is a nothing hand, and the flop was what? Was it 2 8s and a 9?
Yeah, sounds right.
Is that right?
Yep.
And she, in the on the other side of her was an aggressive bettor male.
Famous poker pro, actually, Garrett Adelstein. So he's pretty well known. Yeah.
And she called him basically with nothing, with Jack High. And in that context, it was a stunning call because when you have nothing, Jack High is pretty close to nothing.
Yeah, it really is. I don't want to take us way down the poker rabbit hole, but and we'll talk about the kind of why there's allegations of cheating. But in this particular situation, that was not only like a nothing hand, it was even actually less likely to win than Garrett's inferior hand. Like on paper, Garrett seems to have the weaker hand, but actually Garrett's weaker hand is still going to improve more often than it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I remember seeing from the clip is him looking stunned when the cards were flipped over because it defies all logic. Calling a huge bet with nothing and little chance of winning yourself. And then the cheating allegations come up, right?
Yeah.
So where has the story, that's where I left off. I picked up then the cheating scandals and chess happening at the same time, and I could riff on cheating as cheating itself, but I want to hear more from you about the poker of it if you have something more to say.
Yeah, for sure. And also, let's talk about the cheating aspect as well and the philosophy of that, because there's also been the phishing cheating scandal in the last few days.
That's right.
And I think Google's now pushing this stuff at me. Apparently, there's a cheating scandal in the world of Irish dancing as well. So, wow, what's going on in the world? But the poker hand, yeah, it's interesting. So again, you can't get too detailed without having to do like a 3-hour conversation about poker and how a hand works. But essentially, the way both the players kind of played to that point, it would have been very clear to the amateur player. What's her name? Robbie Jade Lou. I think she's like an Instagram star. It should have been very clear to her that she had the inferior hand, but also that like her hand had almost no chance of improving. So like in poker, typically that's not a terrible position if you're the person to put pressure on your opponent. So if you put that, if Robbie J. Lua put that last big bet in, actually that's kind of a credible play because you're trying to push the opponent. Mm-hmm. You think that their range is weak enough they can't call. You're trying to push them off the hand. But to be the caller, like you've lost what's called the fold equity. Like your opponent can't fold because they've put their chips in the middle. So it's just kind of, it's not a smart move. And so I suppose the cheating allegation was, why did she make this play? And so the allegation, and again, we don't want to kind of say anything that's libelous on the podcast, but the allegation is someone in the control room, because they were like the live feed of the cards going up to the room that's kind of managing the game. Someone was feeding her information about whether her hand was stronger or weaker than her opponent. And like a whole bunch of, like the Reddit sleuths have been all over this, and they've looked up, frame by frame of the video and how she might have been kind of reacting or what she said at various points. It just looks incredibly fishy. Mm-hmm. And I think in just the last few days, there have been some complexities in the story because someone who actually works in the control room now they went through like forensically analyzing the footage. This person stole $15,000 off her stack when they were kind of clearing the table. There's an allegation, maybe because she actually, in a subsequent conversation with the pro, Garrett Adelstein, she actually gave the money back. So, you could almost say, why did she give the money back? Well, that in itself is slightly damning, mm-hmm. Albeit maybe she's she's a rich lady. Maybe she just didn't want any part of this stuff. Anyway, it's a complex story. The smart commentators seem pretty convinced that actually something bad has happened here, but no one's really figured out exactly how or what.
Yeah. So just listening to you narrate that, Luke, I have a strong allergic reaction to cheating. In my role as a professor at the University of Texas, I make it clear to students that the way we learn is by making mistakes, right? No mistakes, no learning. So the only thing you could do to not learn is to cheat, basically. And so if someone cheats, to me, that basically signifies that they understand, not only don't they understand the content, but they understand way less than that, like the whole point of why you're even at university or why you're doing X, Y, or Z. Right. And so I tell them, like, any cheating means you are not yet ready to be at university. And so when I hear about cheating scandals in areas of human competition, or human play, it's chess, poker, athletics. I get this dark cloud of like, what are we doing anything for? Is really everything about the end goal of winning money?
That's the trouble though, right? You introduce money into any equation or, some consequence. And I guess if somebody has it in them to cheat, then potentially they're going to. And I suppose, if we, without getting into the whys and wherefores of how, like, technology and miniaturization is such that, and sort of AI is such that, you could cheat at almost anything these days, whether it's drugs, doping in some sort of athletics event, or having like a supercomputer feeding you the best play in some sort of intellectual event. So I think we've got to accept it's possible. It's very hard to combat. People are going to do it. Who are they really cheating? It's nice to say they're really cheating themselves. But if someone gets away with it and they're making like millions of dollars that they shouldn't have, well, more for them, but they've made millions of dollars.
That argument stands up only so far in my book. I could see cheating if you're talking about, feeding your family or not. Mm-hmm. Like if you're on the edge of, survival, or you're taking care of a large family and food is involved and can I keep the bills on? I still have a hard time swallowing that, but I could sort of understand. But if you have millions of dollars, if you're a professional athlete or one of the world's best poker players or chess grandmaster, then it's all hollow.
Yeah.
Then I mean, you can you look at yourself in the mirror? I don't know, but you're certainly disrespecting the game, right? So you don't care about the game. So what's left, right? It's just money, but you already have a whole lot of it. So what do you gain from that? It's a very dark, I think, egocentric spiral of bleakness to me.
Yeah. But then it's always hard in anything to impose your own morality and values on other people. Like, you're just asking to be disappointed in life when you do that kind of thing. Only I suppose there's like, if any good came out of this, perhaps it's to remind us that this stuff does happen, and like any serious competitive event needs to just take the best precautions it can to avoid it.
I have a hard time saying anything useful when I'm so polarized against what cheating means. That I see no middle ground here, really, which is hard thing to admit.
Yeah, we'll all frown upon these participants in the market, but what are you going to do? People are going to be people, unfortunately.
Yeah, is there anything relevant to say about investing, which also has all kinds of structural imparities and the way the big systems cheat the little guys? kind of. But people have accepted that, right?
I get. Well, it was interesting, isn't it? Because I suppose maybe naively you might think that the big institutions doing their like dark pool trading have this massive advantage over retail investors, and I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I think if you do your homework and do your research, you can have a significant advantage over the institutions just by virtue of the fact you're managing your own money. But maybe as a retail investor, there's probably a different kind of cheating, perhaps more in like our social circle of finfluencers, finance influencers. So there's certainly some big names on Twitter that have had, I guess, let's say allegations of cheating, but essentially what the allegation is that they're posting like every combination of trade and then deleting the tweets that didn't turn out to be true, and then pointing back at their history and going, hey, look what a smart guy I am. You can buy my newsletter for, X $100 a month. So some of these guys are getting taken down by the SEC right now. I think that's a good thing. But it also maybe shines a light on ethical services like Seven Investing, where we're just trying to be super transparent about our results. Our results are not great, frankly, because the whole market is in the hole. But we're being super transparent about that. And, we're super optimistic that when things turn around, we're going to recover harder and faster than the majority of the market.
Right. That transparency is so key. It's always, I think it's always about the process, teach a man to fish, right? And as you were talking about that, I also thought of the current scene on Capitol Hill and all the people in power who, lo and behold, before COVID broke, they're buying all kinds of stocks, which ended up profitable for them. Nancy Pelosi and NVIDIA, right before she heads to Taiwan, and all kinds of bad news breaks out. I don't know how else to call that, but a lack of transparency, right, as a fundamental problem. So, yeah, I like that. I like what you just said about what we do at Seven Investing. In the short term, the results are not great because things have been so brutal. But what has been great throughout is we are really teaching people how to think, how to research, how to analyze companies in the process. And in the end, in the long run, right, that's the one thing that has dignity. It retains its dignity.
Yeah, for sure. Like, we've had multiple, all hands meetings with the team where the conclusion is like, this is a firm that we all want to be proud of. And so, we're taking decision X because this is the thing that will make us most proud of being, representatives of Seven Investing. So that's very high on our list of criteria when we kind of make any decision about how we manage the service.
Oh. Hey, speaking of dignity and an interesting case of, I put in quote, cheating. In our first episode, I mentioned the Tim Ferriss podcast, and then I sent you a link to a conversation with Ed Thorpe, who is the OG mathematician who figured out card counting and how to cheat the casino, right? But is that cheating when you're just maybe outsmarting, right? That's a line. That's a more interesting line. But I was curious what your experience listening to that podcast was.
That was good, actually. I enjoyed it. I've just subscribed to a whole bunch of new podcasts as a consequence of you like pushing me outside of my kind of narrow listening list. So I've subscribed to Tim's as well as a bunch of others. I've only had a chance to listen to that one episode. I did really enjoy it, I'm honest. And I think Tim Ferriss's interview style is good. I like it's kind of open, asking good questions, and quite humble as well, actually. So I'd completely misjudged him, actually, based on, my listening of several years ago. I wasn't convinced by Thorpe, if I'm completely honest. A lot of the guys had a prior conversation, which maybe I should go back and listen to at some point. But he certainly said some stuff that resonated with me, like his comments around the benefits of like just trying to do basic mental arithmetic and kind of mental math, and how that keeps your mind agile and helps you navigate simple stuff more quickly. He seems to have this almost unhealthy degree of paranoia, so about kind of de-risking his own life. I guess he's getting on a bit now. Like, is he in his 80s, Thorpe? Like
I think that was one of the charms about him, because he was quite older, and yet he seemed to me sharp as a tack. And there was the whole conversation about his physical fitness, push-ups and marathons and all this stuff.
He's certainly an older guy, and he seems to have taken this kind of analyzing risk in his own life and trying to eliminate it to an extreme, which is admirable. Like, I'm a guy who likes to measure and monitor everything, but at the same time, I'm also a guy who, maybe it's easier to say as a 50-year-old, not an 80-something-year-old, but I think it's healthy to have a bit of risk in your life. And if you don't introduce kind of structured risks where maybe you have a bit of skill and training, and maybe you're sort of wearing a little bit less risks than the average person doing that activity, or you're probably going to take on risk in some other domain that's perhaps a little less controlled, because naturally, we all have a certain risk tolerance. So I think risk can be healthy, can make for a fuller life.
So guess what? He's 90.
Wow. Well, de-risking clearly is one of the three key criteria to hit those big numbers. Good on him.
I mean, it was a little while since I last heard it, so forgive me if I don't remember details, but I really recall thinking, here's a man who at 90 years of age is still sharp as a tack, and his method, what he described, was he never felt satisfied doing the easy thing, and so he would just kind of continue. I could enter 5K. Okay, I've done a 5K, so maybe let me do a 10K, and they kind of progress like that. Obviously, that doesn't work for everyone, but I wonder if his mathematical mind, what degree that played in him, like you were saying, setting up a life that was almost cultivated to beat the system.
Nice.
The system being aging in this case, and casinos in that case, and
it's good. There's definitely some pride to be had in understanding the rules that perhaps other people don't, and then kind of exploiting those rules to your advantage without, I suppose it's almost kind of veering into cheating the way I articulated that, but certainly not cheating, right? It's about outplaying the world at its own game.
Yeah. And I want to say one other thing, Luke, because you mentioned your sense of Tim Ferriss as someone who felt you had humble qualities, but that you didn't find them earlier, right? In whatever podcast you listen to. I think that's maybe one of the best compliments that any human could give one another. Something like, oh, wow, you've grown, right? You've changed. And all the while being successful, at least in the financial realm. It's often the case, or often enough the case, where massive success actually stunts a person's growth. But to have been, for simplicity's sake, let's say to have had an arrogant edge, and I'm not saying he did, but and then to be successful, and then for that to translate to humility, that's impressive, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I think, for any of us, maybe I'm guilty of this as well. Like at the end of 2020, when my portfolio was flying high and kind of doubled throughout the coronavirus pandemic, definitely I started to veer into an element of thinking I was just an absolute genius, as opposed to, it's just kind of where we are in the cycle. And, the market has a nice way of reminding you how dumb you really are. So it's healthy to get those reminders, and you have to learn the lesson from that. So that's helped me reinstill a bit of humility into my own self-perception.
Yeah, humility as an investor, right? It always ends poorly, right, for people who don't have it, eventually, right?
Yeah, but what's that Batman saying? That you're either the hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah. So you had a game for me?
I did. Do you want to jump to that? Let's actually, there's a topic I'm keen to hear from you from. Let's close the episode out with the 3 conversations game. It's a game I was playing on vacation with my buddy Tom. But before we do, I think you've been reading a book that I'm quite keen to hear a little bit more about.
Oh, okay. Yes, and maybe before that, just to make sure that we do right by our sponsors.
Oh,
right.
Good reminder.
Zacks Investing. Let's take a moment to consider the times we're in. The current economic climate has people wondering, when will it ever end? Record high gas prices, volatility in the market, inflation, ongoing disruptions in the supply chain. Luckily, investors like you have Zacks Investment Research, which provides in-depth financial data and expert analysis to help make more strategic investment decisions. The Fed is doing all it can do to cool down inflation, and stocks have already started to respond. And when the market is gripped in pessimism, Zacks provides the invaluable resources investors need to capitalize on volatility and buy stocks when they're low. They'll also help you spot losers so you'll know which stocks to avoid or eliminate from your portfolio. Experts know market volatility unearth great opportunities. Current conditions have done just that. To provide value to our listeners, Zacks is providing the opportunity to download their report, 5 stocks set to double, absolutely free and with no obligation. Their experts are revealing the top 5 stocks with the best chance of gaining 100% or more in the next 12 months. Imagine how that could affect your portfolio or retirement savings. Fight inflation and download your free report at www.zacks.com/7investingpodcast today.
I did go download that report actually and checked out their 5 stocks. It's a good list. And actually one of those 5 in particular is something I'm super bullish on. I won't say what it is, but it's a 7 investing recommendation from me. I know it's a company that you're a big fan of, which means I guess it's super involved with AI in some way, because that's your big checklist. But I think Zacks are on to a solid winner with that one. And I like their other stocks too.
Amen and hallelujah, Luke. I know exactly what you're talking about.
For sure. So tell us about this book you've been reading. I'm keen to hear a bit more.
I'm halfway through The Metaverse by Matthew Ball and how it will revolutionize everything. And I've paired this with the previous book, which was all about AI. A guide. And right now, halfway through, I've come to a strange, it's not a conclusion, but where I'm at is that it seems like these mega trends that are now in popular consciousness, that both in the realm of AI and in the metaverse, the theme for now is they're not ready. They're not quite ready. And that the barriers to make them ready are quite large. So it's interesting to balance maybe the exuberance and the energy that obviously is behind this stuff with that bit of yes, but. And in both cases, it seems like in the AI case, we have to be very clear that the things AI is succeeding in now is the narrow version of AI, and that the barrier is to that general sense of AI that is able to truly understand what it's doing. In other words, to have some sort of self-reflective aspect to it like humans do, being able to learn from context many things very quickly rather than just being good at one thing, like say chess or Go. And I think what I'm so far picking up from Matthew Ball is that we know that the metaverse will require a whole bunch of things. And I think I want to save that to maybe our next episode, where he defines what the metaverse is, because it's quite in depth and important to understand. But for now, in this general sense, the metaverse will require a whole bunch of things that will require immense computing power and immense networking infrastructure. And that, to some extent, it bumps into the limits of physics. Like, for example, latency. When you experience the metaverse, basically you can't be waiting around because it has to be simultaneous. It has to be synchronous. And so any bit of latency that shows up kind of derails the whole thing. But what happens when you have a user, say, in New York City and someone in Tokyo? Just the physics alone tells you that there's going to be some, whatever it is, 43 millisecond gap. Basically, that means that for us to not experience latency on the human visible side, that means the actual tech has to be damn right near perfect to execute. And that we're very far from that.
Yeah, and, at the moment, I think you're right. Like the technology is a barrier, but also kind of culture is a barrier too. I guess the pandemic helped us embrace Zoom, embrace, e-banking and, all these kind of things that we kind of all take for granted now. We're here on Riverside looking each other in the eye and chatting and recording. But just make the transition to the metaverse where you're kind of wearing, it's essentially a super bold, ugly bit of technology. Like this is a CV1 Oculus Rift. Like it's covered in dust because I haven't used the damn thing because it's just like intrusive and not terribly comfortable. And it's kind of fun and gimmicky. I'm quite keen to check out the latest version of hardware from Apple and from Meta. But just even sort of putting the technology aside, getting people to actually engage in these kind of virtual worlds and do stuff, that's going to be a hurdle too. I saw a news article that Meta themselves are having to kind of bully their employees to use Horizon Worlds, I think it's called, which is like their own sort of collaboration environment, because it's just not that good.
Yeah, and I just read it was a front page New York Times article of the reporter spent 24 hours researching the early adopters of Metaverse, what kinds of things was she running into, all of the harassment policies and so forth.
Yeah.
I came away from that article with more of an ambivalent view. Like she definitely highlighted some of the more interesting aspects, like being able to just, I think she termed it plug and, I don't know if it's plug and play, whether that was the phrase, but like that many people find it enjoyable to say, go through their day and then hop on their bed, put on their headset, plug it into the wall so that it stays charged, and then enter this vast universe of who knows who you'll run into, as opposed to, say, dressing up, putting on makeup, getting dolled up, going out, taking the subway to some local bar, and all that extra stuff. I was like, I could see some appeal to having new experiences right from your bedroom. But then
well, it is pornography that drives technology forwards, right?
But yeah, and the awkwardness of everything you described, and it seems like we're still very early, and yet the excitement is genuine too. And one other thing I'll throw into this circle, I read an article about quantum computing. Same point. Like we're 10 years, at least a decade away from that stuff.
Right.
So from the investing standpoint, I kind of wonder, like it's a fascinating time where all of this stuff is definitely happening. The rate at which it's being developed is increasing. When will the thresholds of genuine viability come around? As tech people, or as a tech person, I don't want to speak for you, I think there's usually the error of getting too excited too quick. And then from an investing standpoint, then you watch, your money burn for a good while.
What you're describing there is the Gartner hype cycle, right? Where the peak of inflated expectations. And then, we all thought, for example, 3D printing. I lost a ton of cash investing in that sector way too early because the hype was there. And then suddenly everything crashes into the trough of disillusionment, and then we climb the slope of productivity, and eventually these things actually have utility, and then that's the time to they start to get ingrained into society.
And I'm a long-term Facebook Meta bear. I don't like the company. I don't like the product. I don't like a lot of the stuff that happened with the analytics, the selling of all of that stuff. I have major ethical issues with them.
Yeah.
But now, having made my way halfway through this book, I'm wondering, okay, so even if the metaverse is going to be the future, Facebook is already plowing in billions of dollars into this thing. And how do you prop up the investing case if it's years away and the money losses are so staggering and the younger generation is leaving that platform? How does this thing survive?
Yeah, I think our colleague Matt Cochran had some really interesting stuff to say about this on one of his Record Rebound podcasts, maybe a month or two ago. But definitely, it seemed at the time like Zuckerberg, the metaverse was his kind of passion project, and he was plowing a ton of cash into that. And that's probably one of the reasons that their Meta stock price has taken a hit. I think he's recanted some of that, and he said, like, actually now it's the time to consolidate what we've got, and maybe be a bit more conservative with our investments in the metaverse. So probably trying to appease shareholders a little bit there, but certainly you can see where his vision is. And no argument, he's a super visionary guy. I used to be a Facebook shareholder. I no longer am for the same reasons as you, though. The ethics it's too hard a question for me.
Yeah. And I'll add, though, to maybe tie this together, the rate at which AI is in fact improving does throw in a new wrinkle to me as far as like how long we will actually have to wait to solve these problems. Because in the past decade, we know if the compute isn't there, well, this is how Moore's law unfolds, and it's a doubling every so often. But now, or every 2 years, whereas now with narrow AI solving all kinds of problems, maybe we're in an unknown territory where, despite it still being far away, it's not as far as it would have been pre-AI technology. So it's fascinating. It's kind of one of those unknowns, right? Like, place your bets, folks. But
yeah, I think none of us could honestly imagine what the world's going to look like in the next 10 years. I think there'll be some transformative changes. As kind of growth investors, it's kind of our job to try and figure this stuff out. But I think we're going to get a whole bunch of good and bad surprises along the journey.
Yeah. And I promise next episode, I'll walk everyone through the more deliberate sequence definition of what the metaverse is. That was eye-opening for me.
Great.
Because it's a very fuzzy term, and I think even Tim Cook of Apple recently said something like, I'm not using that word because most people don't really understand what it's about, and it's just beginning to define itself.
Yep. Cool. Very good. Look forward to it. And you'll be a married man then, so you might have a different perspective on the topic.
You're starting to scare me, Luke.
Right, let's lighten the mood as we close out. So do you want to play my 3 conversations game?
Let's do it. I have no idea, by the way, what you're about to do to me.
Yeah.
So
let's try it on. And if we enjoy it, you can spin it back at me next episode. That's any bombs will kill this segment. But this is a game I was playing with my buddy Tom in Phnom Penh to try and keep the mood light during our poker game. So I'm going to hit you with 3 random conversational topics, and then you're going to put a line through one of them. You're going to say, I don't want to talk about that. So you're leaving me with 2, and then I'm going to kill the second, and then you got to talk about the third one for a minute, and you got to give us your enlightened take on the conversational topic. Sound right?
Okay, sounds great. Let's do it.
Cool. So here are your 3 for this week. First one, who will be on the first one-way trip to Mars? Your second conversational topic is, are flat earthers just having a laugh at the rest of us, or do they really believe this stuff? And your third conversational topic is a bit of a wild card. Can you make an argument for what the world's greatest sandwich is?
Oh, wow.
So you get to kill one of those, flat earthers, sandwich, or Mars.
Yeah. let's kill the sandwich because I'm not my culinary chops are just not what they need to be.
Okay, man. Well, I would like to hear from you on the topic of flat earthers. Are they just having a laugh at the rest of us, or do they really believe this conspiracy theory stuff?
I was hoping you'd pick that one. I think I have something intelligent to say about this. It pains me to say this, but if you study history, you know that once a person conflates a belief with their own identity, it's maybe one of the hardest things for a human to let go of, because it's the equivalent of like having an internal nuclear bomb go off. And psychologically, we know that people would literally, the pain of killing themselves is less than the thought of acknowledging to some extent, I am not who I thought I was. And then especially if you think about the ways we tie in our belief systems to the people that we spend time with, like politics is an easy example for that one, right? That your views might begin to change, but then if they do, you'll be ostracized by everyone around you, and that is too painful a loss. So I would say with 98% confidence, Luke, that the majority of flat earthers, given that it's a kind of, as far as I understand, like a kind of badge or a kind of community that is self-propagating, like they all go to conferences together, right? Like that they took the pill. They maybe it might have been a lark at first, but then over time something shifted and became who they are, and it's not really a joke for them any longer. And admitting something contrary to that would be too devastating. And I started by thinking, like, this is actually a sad question, because we also know from history that pick any belief and you could go to the far extremes, and at some point no matter what the rational argument is, and no matter what the consequence of your belief system is, whether it's systematic destruction of the planet or of another human race or what have you, you will die with that belief rather than give it up.
Yeah, you're right. It's sobering. You did great on the chosen conversation.
I want to ask you the same question, but that's not how this game works, right?
Yeah, you pick your own 3 topics next week.
Okay.
So what do you reckon? Okay. That was it turned out to be a bit of a serious segment. It was supposed to be lighthearted, but I think we had a nice conclusion. Good, thoughtful response. What do you reckon? Do you enjoy the 3 conversations game? Should we do that again next week?
Yeah, and the Mars thing too. Yeah, that would be cool to think about. Right on, Luke. Yeah, so it was a pleasure.
Yes, my friend. Well, I won't speak to you before the nuptials. I hope your last-minute jitters subside. Maybe take a strong shot of bourbon, but not the day before. And wish you all the best and all of our love on your wedding day. I hope it goes flawlessly, and I'm sure you're going to make your lovely future wife a very, very happy lady.
Thank you so much, Luke. That's really kind for you to say, and I feel blessed. Thank you.
And thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of No Limit with Krzystztof and Luke. And I guess we're back for episode 3 in 2 weeks' time. Look forward to seeing you all then.
All right, take care.